They laughed. Oh, how they laughed. My own family, sitting around that perfectly manicured Thanksgiving table, their faces contorted with a mixture of pity and barely concealed amusement. I can still hear the clink of silverware against fine china, the drone of their self-satisfied chatter, as I stood there, utterly broken. My name is Eleanor Vance, and that day, a day meant for gratitude, became the absolute lowest point of my life. It was the day they made it clear I was nothing. What if I told you that in just 20 minutes, you'll witness a story of betrayal so deep it carves a permanent scar? A story where the very people who should have lifted me up instead pushed me into the abyss? You're about to discover how a moment of profound humiliation transformed into an unshakable obsession, an unyielding drive that would eventually lead me to own a house, a beautiful home I built brick by brick with my own 2 hands, and a spirit forged in the fires of their disdain. And then, you'll see the unbelievable audacity, the sheer nerve, when they came crawling back, demanding that very house, for my brother. This isn't some made-up drama, this is my life. Every stinging word, every dismissive glance, it all fueled a fire within me, a fire that burned away my self-doubt and left behind an unyielding resolve. I remember my aunt, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair, saying, "Poor Eleanor, always chasing rainbows. Some people just aren't cut out for success." My cousin, a man who'd inherited a trust fund larger than my wildest dreams, chimed in. "Maybe it's time to accept your lot, Elle. Not everyone gets a golden ticket." The room erupted in snickers. My parents, silent. Their silence was the loudest accusation of all. They watched, they listened, and they said nothing to defend me. That day, I wasn't just broke, I was shattered. I was living in a cramped, roach-infested studio apartment, working 2 dead-end jobs, barely making rent. My car was a sputtering mess, held together by duct tape and prayers. Their pity felt like a poison. But here's the shocking truth. Their laughter, their scorn, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It ignited a spark, a burning resentment that refused to be extinguished. It was the ultimate betrayal, not just their words, but their collective belief that I was inherently incapable. They didn't see potential, they saw a permanent failure. And the bitter irony? The one they always championed, my brother Daniel, the golden boy who could do no wrong, was precisely the reason their future would become entangled with my past in the most explosive way imaginable. You might be thinking, revenge stories are always so predictable, but I promise you, what unfolded next defies all expectations. There were moments I nearly gave up, moments the weight of their judgment felt too heavy to bear. There were sacrifices, late nights fueled by instant coffee, and a burning need to prove them wrong. I devoured books, attended free online courses, and worked tirelessly, often until my hands ached and my eyes burned. Every rejection, every setback, only strengthened my resolve. I learned to build, to invest, to strategize. I learned to survive, and then, to thrive. The day I signed the papers for my first house, a small, unassuming place with a patch of overgrown yard, I felt a quiet triumph. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. No one had given it to me. I had earned it, every single nail and shingle, through sheer grit and an almost obsessive focus. I didn't tell my family. I knew they wouldn't understand. They'd find a way to diminish it, to say it was luck or a fluke. My silence became my shield, and my success, a secret weapon. Then came the call. Years later, the voice on the other end was my mother's, strained and desperate. Daniel, the brother they'd always adored, the one who could never fail, had somehow managed to lose everything. And I mean everything. He'd made a series of spectacularly bad investments, lost his job, and was facing foreclosure on his own home. He was desperate. And they, my family, had the audacity to suggest no, to demand that I give him my house. The house I'd bought with the very money they believed I'd never earn. My heart pounded with a mix of disbelief and a cold, hard satisfaction. This was it. The moment I had both dreaded and secretly craved. The tables had turned. The people who had laughed, at my lowest, were now begging at my feet. But the true shock wasn't their request. It was the chilling reason behind it. A revelation that would unravel a lifetime of carefully constructed family myths and expose a truth so dark, so manipulative, it would make your skin crawl. You won't believe what they were truly willing to do, not just for Daniel, but to preserve their own twisted version of family honor. This isn't just about a house, it's about justice, about reclaiming my narrative, and about the bittersweet sting of finally getting what you've always wanted, but at a cost you never anticipated. Get ready, because the real story, the one they never wanted you to hear, is about to begin. The old house stood on a hill overlooking the town, a silent sentinel to a lifetime of disappointments. My name is Alex, and for 27 years this crumbling structure had been both my sanctuary and my prison. Every creak of the floorboards, every draft whistling through the cracked window panes, whispered tales of what I didn't have, what I wasn't. Our family, the Millers, weren't poor, not by any stretch. They were just selective with their generosity, especially when it came to me. From the time I was a child, I was the odd one out. My older brother Mark was the golden boy, the heir apparent to my father's thriving construction business. Mark excelled at everything, or so it seemed. He had the charm, the quick wit, and the effortless ability to make everyone laugh. I, on the other hand, was quiet, observant, and preferred the company of books to boisterous family gatherings. This difference wasn't just tolerated, it was weaponized. Every family dinner became a performance, with Mark as the star and me as the understudy who never got to go on. I remember one Thanksgiving vividly. I was 17, brimming with an idea for a sustainable housing project. I'd spent months researching, drawing up blueprints, even calculating potential profits. I presented it to my father, my voice shaking with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He listened, nodding occasionally, then passed my detailed proposal to Mark. Mark, without even glancing at it, chuckled. Sustainable? Alex, you're going to build houses out of recycled yogurt cups? The room erupted in laughter. My mother patted my arm, a dismissive gesture that felt like a slap. Alex, dear, stick to your books. Business isn't for everyone. The sting of that moment never faded. It solidified my understanding. I was seen as incapable, a dreamer who couldn't possibly contribute anything of value. After high school, while Mark was fast-tracked into a management position at Miller Construction, I worked odd jobs. I waited tables, stocked shelves, even drove a delivery truck. Each meager paycheck was carefully hoarded, a tiny rebellion against the narrative my family had written for me. They offered help, of course, always framed as a handout. Alex, why don't you just come work for your father? It's easier than struggling. Their pity felt like a cage. I refused, clinging to my independence, however fragile it seemed. The true turning point came 3 years ago. My grandmother, bless her kind soul, passed away. She was the only one in the family who genuinely saw me, who encouraged my quiet ambitions. In her will, she left me a small inheritance, enough to put a down payment on a modest little bungalow on the outskirts of town. It wasn't the sprawling estate my parents lived in, or the sleek modern condo Mark had just bought. It was mine. My first real step towards something of my own. The news spread like wildfire through the family. The reactions were predictable. My aunt, always the most cutting, remarked, "Well, isn't that sweet? Alex finally has a roof over her head that isn't ours." My mother, feigning concern, called to ask if I was sure I could handle the responsibilities of homeownership. Even Mark, usually too preoccupied with his own success to notice me, managed a condescending smirk. "Don't forget to pay your property taxes, little sister. Wouldn't want the bank taking your little shack." Their words, intended to diminish my achievement, only fueled a quiet fire within me. I moved into that house with a fierce determination. It needed work, a lot of work. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown, and the plumbing groaned with every flush. But it was my work. Every nail I hammered, every brushstroke of paint, felt like a defiant act. I learned to fix leaky faucets from YouTube videos, to patch drywall, to prune roses. The house became a physical manifestation of my growing self-reliance, a testament to what I could achieve when left to my own devices. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. I found a job I loved, working as a freelance graphic designer, building a client base from scratch. My little bungalow became my sanctuary, my office, my haven. I rarely saw my family, preferring to keep the comfortable distance I had painstakingly created. They would call occasionally, usually to invite me to some grand family event, and I would politely decline. I was content, building my life brick by brick, away from their judging eyes. Then, a few weeks ago, the call came. It was my mother, her voice unusually strained. "Alex," she began, "we need to talk. It's about Mark." A cold dread settled in my stomach. Mark. It always came back to Mark. She explained in vague, hushed tones that Mark had made some unwise investments at Miller Construction. The company was facing a significant financial crisis, and Mark, it seemed, was at the heart of it. He was losing everything: his condo, his car, even his reputation. My mother's voice cracked. "He needs help, Alex. Desperate help." I listened, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Pity wasn't one of them. Not yet. The true shock came when she finally revealed the purpose of her call. "Alex," she pleaded, "we were hoping. Perhaps you could help him out. You have that little house, don't you? It's not much, but it could be a temporary solution for Mark, just until he gets back on his feet." My breath hitched. My house? The one they'd laughed at, dismissed, and belittled? The sanctuary I had built with my own 2 hands? They wanted it. For Mark. It wasn't a request, it was an expectation, delivered with the same casual entitlement they had always shown. The audacity of it, the sheer nerve, hit me like a physical blow. The quiet fire within me, the one that had smoldered for years, suddenly roared to life. This wasn't just about a house. This was about everything. The air in the living room grew thick, heavy with unspoken expectations. My mother, ever the orchestrator, cleared her throat. "Mark's career is really taking off, Alex. He needs a place befitting his stature. Something close to the city, with a bit of land." Her eyes flickered around my meticulously restored living room, the one I had spent years pouring my heart and soul into. Every reclaimed beam, every hand-sanded floorboard whispered my name. This wasn't just a house, it was a testament to my resilience, a monument to everything they said I couldn't achieve. My father chimed in, his voice resonating with that familiar booming authority he reserved for business deals. "It's a sound investment for the family, son. Mark will take good care of it. Think of it as contributing to the greater good." The greater good, of course, always meant Mark's good. It always had. I stared at them, a cold fury beginning to simmer beneath my calm exterior. They truly believed they were entitled to it, to everything I had built. The assumption was the most galling part, the casual dismissal of my ownership, my effort, my very existence. I finally found my voice, a low rumble that surprised even me. "This house isn't for sale." My mother's smile faltered, replaced by a look of bewildered annoyance. My father's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not by me. Mark, predictably, remained silent, a smirk playing on his lips. He knew this wasn't his fight, not yet. He was content to let our parents do the dirty work, just as he always had. He was the golden boy, untouchable, while I was the inconvenient truth. "Don't be ridiculous, Alex," my mother scoffed, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's just a house. We'll compensate you, of course, generously. Generously." The word hung in the air, a hollow promise. Their idea of generosity had always been crumbs, while Mark feasted on the whole loaf. This wasn't about compensation. It was about control, about putting me back in my place, the place where I owned nothing, where I was nothing. I stood up, my hands clenched at my sides. "It's not just a house, it's my house, and it's not for sale." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock I had painstakingly repaired. My father pushed himself out of his armchair, his face reddening. "Alex, don't make this difficult. We're your family. We know what's best for you." The familiar refrain, the one that had justified every slight, every dismissal, every act of subtle cruelty. "What's best for me?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "What's best for me is to finally be free of your best interests." The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. Mark's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise. This wasn't the quiet, compliant Alex they remembered. This was someone new, someone forged in the fires of their neglect. My father took a step towards me, his eyes narrowed. "You're being ungrateful, after everything we've done for you." His voice was laced with menace, a thinly veiled threat. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Everything you've done for me was to ensure Mark's success, not mine." I built this, brick by brick, with my own hands, while you were busy building his empire. The truth, raw and undeniable, hung between us. The conversation devolved into a shouting match, a cacophony of accusations and justifications. My mother's voice rose to a shrill pitch, accusing me of selfishness, of betraying my family. My father resorted to veiled threats about my future, about how difficult I was making things for myself. Mark finally spoke up, his voice smooth and placating. "Come on, Alex. Be reasonable. It's for the best." His feigned concern was almost more infuriating than their outright aggression. I finally cut through their noise, my voice steady, resolute. "Get out." The two words, simple and direct, brought their tirade to an abrupt halt. My parents stared at me, mouths agape. Mark's eyes widened, a rare glimpse of genuine shock. "You heard me," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Get out of my house. Now." The emotional weight of the moment was crushing, yet I felt an unfamiliar surge of power. This was my line in the sand, drawn with years of unspoken resentment. They hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly began to move towards the door. My mother shot me a look of pure venom, a look I had never seen directed at me before. My father, defeated for the first time in my memory, simply shook his head. Mark, however, paused at the threshold, turning back to face me. His eyes, usually so full of a careless confidence, now held a flicker of something new, fear. He knew, in that moment, that the rules had changed, and he knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The quiet fire within me had erupted, and it was burning for something more than just a house. It was burning for justice. The fire that had ignited inside me wasn't a sudden blaze, it was a slow burn, fueled by years of neglect and dismissal. After that fateful dinner, with Mark's smirk still etched in my mind, something fundamentally shifted. The desire for acceptance, for a place at their table, died. In its place, a colder, more determined ambition took root. I wasn't just working odd jobs anymore, I was strategizing. Every menial task, every early morning, every late night, became a brick laid in the foundation of my own future, a future they couldn't touch. My initial thought was simply to escape, to build a life so far removed from theirs that their opinions wouldn't even register. But as I started to gain traction, as my first few small investments began to yield returns, a new, more potent idea began to form. Why merely escape when I could redefine what success looked like, not just for myself, but in their eyes? The resentment, which had simmered for so long, began to morph into a calculated obsession. I wasn't just earning money, I was accumulating power. The kind of power that could finally silence their condescending laughter. I started small, investing in distressed properties in overlooked neighborhoods, the kind of places my father's company wouldn't even glance at. I learned everything I could about real estate, about construction, about negotiation. My nights were spent poring over blueprints, market analyses, and legal documents. My days were a blur of property viewings, contractor meetings, and bank appointments. I became a ghost, disappearing from family gatherings, my absence barely noticed, or if it was only remarked upon with a dismissive shrug. "Alex is off in his own world," my mother would say, oblivious to the fact that my world was rapidly expanding, while theirs remained stubbornly fixed. One particular property became my obsession, an old Victorian on the outskirts of town, crumbling but with good bones, sitting on a sprawling lot. It was a local eyesore, a testament to failed dreams, and everyone knew it. My father's company had even considered it once, then dismissed it as too much trouble for too little return. That dismissal, that casual disregard, only strengthened my resolve. I saw potential where they saw decay, and more importantly, I saw a symbol. This wouldn't just be a house, it would be a monument to everything they thought I couldn't achieve. The purchase was grueling. I poured every penny I had, every ounce of energy, into acquiring that property. The negotiations were brutal, the financing even more so. I faced skepticism from banks, outright mockery from some real estate agents who knew my family. "Miller's son trying to play with the big boys?" one sneered. Each challenge, each sneer, was another spark to the fire. I remembered Mark's laughter about recycled yogurt cups, and I channeled that memory into every swing of the hammer, every late-night design tweak. I didn't hire a large crew. I did most of the demolition and initial renovation myself, learning on the fly, making mistakes, and then fixing them. My hands, once soft from years of reading, became calloused and strong. The house became my second skin, its dust a constant companion. I lived on instant noodles and coffee, often sleeping on a makeshift cot in what would eventually become the living room. There were moments of doubt, moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. But then I'd picture Mark's face, the easy confidence, the way he'd always effortlessly overshadowed me, and the doubt would vanish, replaced by a fierce resolve. As the house slowly began to take shape, transforming from a derelict shell into a beautiful modern home, a new kind of tension began to build, not just within me, but subtly, imperceptibly, in the air around my family. Whispers started reaching me, through distant relatives, through contractors who worked for both me and Miller Construction. Heard Alex is actually doing something with that old Victorian. It's looking pretty good, surprisingly. These weren't compliments, not yet. They were observations, tinged with disbelief. Then came the open house. I had meticulously planned every detail, from the staging to the marketing. I didn't send personal invitations to my family. I simply made sure the local papers and real estate listings were saturated with information. I wanted them to find out on their own, to stumble upon my success rather than be presented with it. The day of the open house, I stood on the newly paved driveway, watching cars pull up, a nervous excitement churning in my stomach. The first few hours were a blur of polite smiles and impressed murmurs. Then, a familiar black sedan pulled up. My father's car. My heart hammered against my ribs. He stepped out, followed by my mother, and then, inevitably, Mark. They looked different, out of place in their expensive clothes against the backdrop of my reclaimed dream. Mark's usual swagger was noticeably absent. He scanned the house, his eyes wide, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher crossing his face. My mother, usually so composed, looked genuinely stunned. My father, ever the businessman, walked through the house with a critical eye, but even he couldn't hide the grudging respect in his posture. They approached me, a strange silence hanging between us. My mother was the first to speak, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Alex, this is remarkable." My father simply nodded, a tight, almost imperceptible nod. Then Mark stepped forward. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw it clearly, not just surprise, but a dawning realization, a hint of something akin to fear. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. He knew in that moment that the rules had changed, and he knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The quiet fire within me had erupted, and it was burning for something more than just a house. It was burning for justice, and the sale of that house was just the first match strike. The dust from the house sale had barely settled when the phone calls began. Not from friends, not from distant relatives checking in, but from the family members who had dismissed me for years. My mother's voice, usually laced with a saccharine sweetness when speaking to Mark, now held a sharp edge of indignation. "Alex, how could you? Selling the family home without even discussing it with us? Your father is absolutely beside himself." I let her rant, picturing her perfectly manicured hand gripping the phone, her face flushed with a fury I had only ever seen directed at me. "Mother," I finally interrupted, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "It was my house. Purchased with my money, developed with my efforts. There was nothing to discuss." The silence on the other end was deafening, a testament to her shock. She had genuinely believed I would simply hand it over, a loyal, subservient son, but that Alex was long gone. The one who remained was forged in the fires of their neglect. The confrontations escalated. My aunts and uncles, who had always praised Mark's business acumen while subtly deriding my unrealistic dreams, started calling, their voices dripping with feigned concern. "Alex, are you sure you're making sound financial decisions?" "We just worry about you." I knew their worry wasn't for me, but for the perceived slight against the family name, and more importantly, against Mark. My cousin, Brenda, even suggested I was losing my mind and offered to help me manage my finances, a thinly veiled attempt to gain control. I simply hung up. Their entitlement was breathtaking, their audacity boundless. Then came the meeting. A formal family dinner, orchestrated by my father, ostensibly to clear the air. I walked into the familiar dining room, a space that had witnessed so many of my humiliations and felt a strange sense of power. They were all there. My parents, Mark, his wife Sarah, and a few other key family members, all seated around the polished mahogany table, their faces a mixture of forced smiles and barely concealed resentment. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. My father, ever the patriarch, cleared his throat. "Alex," he began, his tone measured, "we need to talk about this house." It was always understood that the property would remain in the family. It was meant for Mark. My blood ran cold at the casual presumption. It was always for Mark. Everything was always for Mark. "Understood by whom, father?" I asked, my voice cutting through the tension. "Certainly not by me. I bought that land, I developed it, I built that house from the ground up. It was never Mark's, it was mine." Mark, predictably, interjected. "Come on, Alex, don't be ridiculous. We're family. You know I needed a larger place for Sarah and the kids. This is just uncalled for." He even tried to play the victim, as if my success was a personal attack on him. "Needed a larger place?" I countered, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You have a 5-bedroom house, Mark. You just wanted my house because it was new, because it was a symbol of something I created, something you didn't. You wanted to take credit for it, just like you always took credit for my ideas, my efforts." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Sarah looked at Mark, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. My mother, unable to bear the truth, jumped in. "Alex, that's enough. Your brother has always been there for you. He helped you with your little projects." Her voice was shrill, desperate to maintain the illusion of Mark's benevolence. "Helped me?" I scoffed, remembering the Thanksgiving dinner, the laughter, the dismissal. "He mocked me, Mother. You all did. You told me business wasn't for me. You told me to stick to my books. And now, when I've built something substantial, something successful, you all want a piece of it, not for me, but for Mark." The accusations flew back and forth, a verbal brawl erupting in the elegant dining room. I revealed details they had long forgotten or conveniently ignored. The times I was denied funding for my projects, the countless hours I spent working while Mark golfed, the dismissive comments veiled as advice. Each revelation chipped away at their carefully constructed facade of a loving, supportive family. Then came the bombshell. My father, his face red with anger, finally said, "We're going to buy it back, Alex. We'll offer you a fair price, and you'll sell it to Mark." "This is non-negotiable." I looked at him, then at Mark, who had a smug, triumphant look on his face, as if this was the inevitable outcome. They still didn't understand. They still thought they could control me, buy me off, dictate my life. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I won't sell it back. Not to you, and certainly not to Mark." Their faces contorted in disbelief. "The house is already under contract, to a new buyer. The sale closes next week." A collective gasp filled the room. Mark's jaw dropped. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. The house was gone. Their control was gone. The game was over. And for the first time in my life, I held all the cards. The silence that followed was not of shock, but of absolute crushing defeat. The silence that followed was not of shock, but of absolute crushing defeat. My father's face, usually a mask of unshakable authority, crumpled. My mother, who always had a dismissive pat or a patronizing smile ready, looked utterly lost. Mark, the golden boy, the one who always had a witty retort, stood speechless, his jaw still hanging open. The air in the room, thick with their collective disbelief, felt like a physical weight pressing down on them. They had always assumed I would fail, that I would always be the understudy, forever waiting in the wings. Now, the stage was mine, and they were merely spectators. My voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the oppressive quiet. "I understand this is a lot to process. I know you had plans for this house, Mark." The mention of his name seemed to jolt him. He finally closed his mouth, his eyes narrowing, a flicker of the old arrogance returning, quickly overshadowed by a desperate confusion. He had always been so sure of his place, so confident in his entitlement. Seeing him so completely unmoored was a strange kind of satisfaction, a validation of every slight, every dismissive laugh I had ever endured. My mother found her voice first, a thin, reedy sound. "Alex, how could you? This is your family home. It's Mark's inheritance." Her words, meant to sting, bounced off me. Inheritance? They had never considered. Anything mine, not truly. This house, this symbol of their control, was simply another asset they assumed would fall into Mark's lap. Inheritance? I echoed, a genuine laugh escaping me, devoid of humor. Funny, I don't recall ever being included in any discussions about inheritances, especially when I was struggling to pay rent in a shoebox apartment while Mark was driving a new luxury car every year. The truth of it hung in the air, undeniable, their faces flushed, a mix of shame and anger. They couldn't deny it, not now. The narrative they had built around me, the incapable, the dreamer, the failure, was crumbling before their eyes. My father, regaining some composure, stepped forward. Alex, let's be reasonable. We can work something out. Mark needs this house. It's perfect for him and Sarah, with the new baby coming. He tried to project calm, but his voice betrayed a desperate plea. He was negotiating, not commanding. This was a new dynamic, one they were clearly uncomfortable with. Needs it? I countered, my voice rising slightly, the years of suppressed frustration bubbling to the surface. He needs it? What about what I needed? What about when I needed a loan for college, and you told me to pull myself up by my bootstraps? What about when I needed a job, and Mark laughed at my ideas, calling them pie in the sky? The words were a torrent, each one a sharp jab, cutting through their carefully constructed facade. Mark finally spoke, his voice hoarse with disbelief. You actually bought it? The old place? Why would you even want it? His question was laced with genuine confusion, unable to grasp a motivation beyond profit or status. He couldn't comprehend that for me, it was about something far deeper than real estate. Why? I asked, stepping closer to him, my gaze unwavering. Because it represents everything you all thought I couldn't have. It represents every time you laughed, every time you dismissed me. This isn't just a house, Mark, it's a statement. My eyes flickered to my parents, then back to him, and it's a statement I've been waiting a very long time to make. My mother, tears welling in her eyes, pleaded, Alex, please, we're family. Can't we just put this behind us? Mark will pay you for it. Whatever you want. The desperation in her voice was palpable, a stark contrast to her usual detached demeanor. Family? I repeated, a bitter taste in my mouth. When was I ever truly part of this family? When I was the punchline? When my dreams were entertainment for your dinner parties? Family doesn't dismiss, doesn't mock, doesn't abandon. The sting of those memories was fresh, vivid, as if it had happened yesterday. My father, seeing that pleas were useless, resorted to veiled threats. This isn't going to look good, Alex. What will people say? Your own brother, out on the street. Because you're being vindictive. His words held a desperate edge, a last-ditch effort to control the narrative, to shame me into submission. I met his gaze unafraid. Let them say what they want. I've heard worse. And for the record, Mark isn't out on the street. He has a thriving business, a good income. He can afford his own house, perhaps even a better one than this old place. My voice was calm, almost clinical. I was no longer the desperate, insecure boy. But it's the principle of the thing, Mark finally erupted, his face red with a mixture of anger and humiliation. You're doing this just to spite me. Spite you, I scoffed, a genuine mirthless laugh escaping me. Mark, you flatter yourself. This isn't about you, not entirely. This is about me. This is about reclaiming what was always denied to me. This is about proving to myself and to anyone who ever doubted me that I am capable, that I am worthy. The weight of years of silent struggle, of being overlooked and undervalued, lifted with each word. My mother, still tearful, tried one last tactic. What about the memories, Alex? All the Christmases, the birthdays. You'll just throw them away? Memories? I asked, my voice softening, but not with sentimentality. My memories of this house are of being invisible, of being belittled, of being told I wasn't good enough. Those aren't memories I cherish. This house for me is a symbol of a past I needed to conquer, not preserve. The finality in my tone was unmistakable. The sale was closing, the house was mine. The past was finally being rewritten. The final papers were signed, the ink still wet, and the heavy oak door of the lawyer's office closed behind me with a soft thud. I stood on the bustling city sidewalk, a stark contrast to the quiet, dusty rooms of the old house. A strange weight lifted from my shoulders, replaced by an unfamiliar lightness. The house, that symbol of my past, was no longer a burden, no longer a monument to my family's dismissiveness. It was simply a transaction, a piece of property I now owned, free and clear. My phone vibrated. It was my mother. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice, usually so composed, was laced with an uncharacteristic tremor. "Alex," she began, he's not taking this well." A small, bitter smile touched my lips. "Not taking what well, Mother? The fact that I bought a house?" My tone was deliberately neutral, devoid of the emotion she probably expected. She sighed, a dramatic put-upon sound. "He feels betrayed. He always thought the house would be his, eventually. It was always understood." "Understood by whom?" I asked, my voice cutting through her self-pity. "Certainly not by me. Was it understood when I was told my ideas were foolish? When I was laughed at for dreaming bigger than a recycled yogurt cup? Was it understood when Mark was given every opportunity and I was left to find my own way?" A long silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant hum of city traffic. "Alex, you're being cruel," she finally whispered. "He's your brother." "He's my brother," I echoed, the words tasting like ash. "And for years he stood by, or actively participated, as I was systematically undermined. He watched as I struggled, and he never once offered a hand. Only more ridicule. Now he feels betrayed because I dared to succeed on my own terms, without his blessing, or my father's handouts." The raw emotion I had suppressed for so long began to surface. "This isn't about the house, Mother. This is about years of being invisible, of being told I wasn't enough. The house is just the physical manifestation of me finally saying, I am enough, and I don't need your approval." I could hear her breathing, ragged and uneven. "What do you want, Alex?" she finally asked, her voice thin. "What will it take for you to let this go?" "Let what go?" I countered, a cold clarity settling over me. "The truth? The fact that I built something from nothing while Mark was handed everything. There's nothing to let go. This is simply the consequence of choices made long ago, not by me." The next day, a carefully worded email arrived from my father's lawyer. It was a formal offer to buy the house from me, at a price significantly higher than what I had paid. The subtext was clear. They wanted to erase my victory, to reclaim what they felt was rightfully theirs, to restore the family hierarchy. I drafted a one-line reply, "Not for sale." The phone calls escalated. My father, his voice booming with uncharacteristic desperation, tried to appeal to my family loyalty. Mark, in a rare moment of vulnerability, even called, his usual bravado replaced by a whining plea. "Alex, please, this is embarrassing. Just sell it back. We can pretend this never happened." "Pretend what never happened, Mark?" I asked, my voice calm, almost serene. "That I worked tirelessly, against all odds, to achieve something you thought impossible for me. That I now own a piece of property that you, with all your success, couldn't secure? No, Mark, we're not pretending anything. This is happening." The family dinner invitations stopped coming. The hushed whispers at social gatherings I heard now revolved around my coldness, my betrayal. It was a familiar narrative, only this time I was the villain, not the victim, and I found, to my surprise, that I didn't care. The sting of their judgment had long since dulled. Their opinions, once so powerful, now held no sway over me. One afternoon, months later, I drove past the old house. It stood proud and strong, a fresh coat of paint on its exterior, new landscaping breathing life into the neglected garden. I had meticulously restored it, not for them, but for myself. It was no longer the symbol of my past failures, but a testament to my resilience. I had transformed it, just as I had transformed myself. I didn't live in the house. I had no desire to. Instead, I had leased it to a young family, just starting out, full of dreams and aspirations. They were building their own future within its walls, creating new, happy memories, unburdened by the ghosts of my past. My emotional arc had come full circle. The resentment that had simmered for years had led to a betrayal I could not ignore. That betrayal had fueled an obsession to prove my worth, not to them, but to myself. And in the act of securing that house, I had found a form of justice. Not a cruel, destructive revenge, but a quiet, empowering reclamation of my own narrative. The closure wasn't a sudden, blinding light, but a slow, steady dawn. There was a bittersweet quality to it, certainly. I had achieved what I set out to do, but at the cost of any remaining illusion of family harmony. Yet the peace I felt was profound. I had learned that true validation doesn't come from external approval, but from internal strength. My family may have laughed when I had nothing, but now I had everything that truly mattered. My self-respect, my independence, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had built my own foundation, brick by painstaking brick, without their help and despite their doubt. The house was just a house. My freedom, however, was priceless. The silence in the room stretched, thick and suffocating, after I finished speaking. My mother's face, usually a mask of gentle concern, was twisted into something I barely recognized, a mix of shock, hurt, and a dawning comprehension. My father, who had always played the role of the stoic patriarch, simply stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. My brother, Kevin, the golden child, the one they always defended, was pale, his eyes wide with a fear I had never seen there before. I watched them, truly watched them, for the first time in years. All the resentment, the bitterness, the raw anger that had fueled me for so long, felt like it was finally dissipating, leaving behind a strange, empty ache. For years, I had built walls around my heart, brick by brick, each one cemented with their dismissals, their laughter, their unwavering belief that I was nothing. Now, those walls were crumbling, not with a triumphant crash, but with a quiet, almost melancholic sigh. My mother was the first to break the silence. Her voice was thin, reedy. "Mark, is this true?" I met her gaze directly. "Every word, Mom, every single painful word." She began to weep then, soft, broken sobs that tore at something deep inside me. This wasn't the manipulative crying I'd seen before. This was genuine anguish. My father finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't apologize, not with words, but the regret in his expression was palpable. He looked like a man who had suddenly woken from a long, self-imposed slumber, only to find his world in ruins. Kevin, however, reacted differently. He stood up, his face contorted in a sneer. "You're making this up, Mark! You're just trying to hurt us because you're jealous. You always were." The old Kevin, the one who always deflected, always blamed, was still there. But this time, his words held no power over me. I simply looked at him, a calm, almost pitying expression on my face. "Kevin, I don't need to make anything up. The truth is far more damning than any lie I could invent." He scoffed, but his eyes darted nervously between me and our parents. He knew. He had always known. Then, I did something I hadn't planned. I pulled out a small, leather-bound journal from my bag. It was the journal I had kept during those darkest years, filled with detailed accounts, dates, conversations. I placed it gently on the coffee table. "Everything I just told you, it's all in here," I said, my voice steady. "The times you called me worthless, the times you dismissed my dreams, the day you laughed when I said I'd buy a house, the moment you told me I'd never amount to anything, and yes, the day you tried to take this house from me, for Kevin." My mother reached for the journal, her hands trembling as she opened it to a random page. Her eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, and a gasp escaped her lips. My father leaned over, reading with her, his face growing grimmer with each word. Kevin just watched them, his bravado slowly deflating. The confrontation I had imagined for so long, the explosive, cathartic moment of justice, wasn't playing out with shouting and accusations. Instead, it was a quiet, devastating raveling. They were seeing themselves, truly seeing themselves, through my eyes. "This house," I finally said, my voice soft but firm, "is not for sale. Not to you, not to Kevin. It's mine. I built this life with my own hands, brick by painful brick, and I will keep it." My mother looked up, her eyes pleading. "Mark, please, can't we fix this?" I paused, considering her words. The resentment was gone, replaced by a profound weariness. "Fixing this," I said, "means acknowledging what happened. It means understanding the depth of the hurt you inflicted. It means taking responsibility." I didn't offer immediate forgiveness. I couldn't. The wounds were too deep, the scars too fresh. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for them, but for myself. The obsession that had consumed me, the burning desire for revenge, had finally run its course. I had spoken my truth, and they had heard it. Walking out of that house, the house I had earned, the house they had tried to take, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt lighter. The weight I had carried for so long, the bitterness that had gnawed at my soul, was finally lifted. The closure I had sought wasn't in their humiliation, but in my own liberation. The road ahead would be long. Rebuilding trust, if it was even possible, would take years. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the worthless boy they had laughed at. I was Mark, a man who had built his own life, his own home, and finally, his own peace. And that, in the end, was the greatest revenge of all.